What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NFL Strategy Show. It's week 2, week 1 in the books. Screw you, Vic Fangio, but we move on. We've got a ton of games to touch on. I'm Dave Loughran. With me, Sal Vetri and Ben Rasa, as always. I see you over there, Ben, shaking your head, nodding, or shaking your head in disgust at what we saw late last night.
Yeah, I stayed up for that, which is shocking.
Oh, you did it.
You know, I did. I I'm really high on the Broncos. This year,
I'm a fan. At least he was good.
He was good. They covered. I mean, that was slightly helpful, but that was the theme. And we're going to get into, obviously, some week 1 stuff. The theme to me was I was stunned. I know there's always some rust on coaches, on players, a lot of head scratching decisions. I hate to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy. Just dumb decisions out there.
So stupid. And if your excuse is, well, Gostkowski wasn't kicking well, it's like a 25-yarder. He still has an 85% chance or higher of making that field goal. It's preposterous. And then good thing he had 2 timeouts left, Sal, because we can roll them over like AT&T minutes onto his next bill. What a joke. Obviously, they do not roll over. They're gone. It's 17 seconds left with 3 timeouts and nothing to work with.
Yeah, I was sleeping like a baby at that point, so I have 0% clue on what you're talking about. I mean, my biggest week 1 frustration is DeAndre Swift not catching a pass to make me positive in the betting streets for the Lions, like -1.5, drops a wide open touchdown. That's my biggest frustration.
That was brutal. There were a bunch of spots that just got really ugly. But yeah, no, Gostkowski missed 3 field goals and an extra point, right?
Yeah, I got all that. I saw that stuff.
As they drove down the field, Vic Fangio decided not to call any timeouts. He had 3 timeouts left, decided not to call any timeouts, let the Titans march down to the 12-yard line or something, Ben?
Yeah, they were on the doorstep.
They kick a field goal. He let it wind down to 17 seconds left. So they had 3 timeouts left and 17 seconds to go 80 yards downfield. Obviously, didn't work.
Sense. Yeah, that makes absolutely no sense. I can't even try and see the logic there.
No, and I had the Broncos outright, Ben. I had Broncos money. I really thought they were winning this game. And the thing that pisses me off the most is, yeah, you can talk about Gostkowski and maybe the Broncos should have lost more, but they were on the doorstep too. And they tried some goofy shovel pass.
Jake Butt shovel pass. 4th and inches
to go to get into the goal or to get into the end zone, and they screwed it up. So I don't know. I was pretty frustrated with that, but we move on. Sal, anything else from week 1 stand out to you? We're going to recap a lot of this throughout the show, just given that we're going to take a look back on week 1 stats and apply it to week 2. But the one thing I'll throw out there, and you can expand on this if you'd like, or you can go somewhere else with it. The timeshares in this league are just getting more and more pronounced, where it's going to be difficult each week with some of these backfields to figure it out. And I have no doubt that many of these coaches are going to run the hot hand approach. So if we're just looking at it like, oh, well, you know what? Last week they did this. They should do it again this week. I'm not convinced that will be the case with many of these teams at all.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest standout kind of goes hand in hand with that to an extent. It's just how much the rookies were involved on a lot of these teams, especially with not having any preseason games, no rookie camp. I mean, you had some of the running backs, J.K. Dobbins, Zach Moss, these running backs being involved, right? Jonathan Taylor, we can go down the list of all the ones, but even in the wide receivers, so many rookies were involved, a lot more than I thought they would be. I mean, you have Jalen Reagor leading his team in overall routes, leading his team in overall snaps. Wasn't expecting that a lot. Hopefully Ruggs is okay, but that's probably the biggest one overall. Outside of that would probably just be, I mean, you had individual spots like studs, wide receivers playing well, DeAndre Hopkins not even missing a beat, going to a new team, new quarterback, not a lot of time. But yeah, the rookies was the biggest standout for me.
For sure. And DeAndre Swift, like you mentioned, he had a chance to win the game. They went to DeAndre Swift on the final drive of the game. So, yeah, big stuff. Jerry Jeudy, by the way, Ben.
Catch the ball.
That drop really frustrated me. But that kid's footwork is nuts.
Oh, he's going to be great.
He can change direction like nothing I've seen. He's fast. He planted his foot. Two defenders fell over, and then he goes just horizontally on the field, cuts forward, picks up another 15 yards. He made some really big plays, but he dropped a huge one. That would have iced the game, and that would have given me the win, because McManus at home in the altitude is not missing a 45-yard field goal. It just wasn't going to happen.
No, there was just a lot of I've never seen my takeaway from week one. It's nothing that we can really use. I've never seen guys so wide open. I can recount, it feels like dozens of touchdowns where there was a guy 20 yards in the like, I don't know. I know there's rust again. You just saw it with the defenses. I thought that the offenses would look sluggish for the most part. I thought they actually looked all right. It was just so many blown coverages, a lot of sloppy penalties. I'm sure that'll get cleaned up, but I think it does go hand in hand with, you're not going to have guys right off the bat taking massive, workloads on the ground. I think these teams don't want to get somebody hurt, don't want to run guys into the ground if they're not physically ready.
For sure. And speaking of rookies, I crushed the player prop market this week, but one that I missed on was I had CeeDee Lamb under 52.5 yards, and he easily got over that. So, like you guys said, the rookies were really involved. They looked pretty impressive. Even Jalen Reagor, as you mentioned, Sal, getting opportunities. They just couldn't get any separation when then Carson Wentz doesn't have any time to throw. And we're going to get into all of that. Let's start with quarterbacks. Kick it off with you, Sal. And hey, hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Appreciate that greatly. It helps us a ton. If you're just joining, welcome. We're happy to have you guys with us as we get started on week 2. Week 1's already in the books. So we'll kick it off at the top of the position. Lamar Jackson, 8,200, using DraftKings pricing here just to make it a little bit easier. He was, his typical self. He completed 20 of 25, 275 yards, 3 touchdowns. Not the same rushing upside, but he didn't really need it. And I guess Ben and I will hang our heads in shame once again. Sal, there's something about this Cleveland team. Eventually, they're going to get everybody, right? I abstained from the hype. I stayed away. I was good about that. And this year I said, I'm buying in. Fuck it. I'm buying in. Well, they look horrible once again. Lamar Jackson decimated them across 4 quarters. Not at any point in that game was it competitive.
Yeah, I mean, they looked their offense, like if you look at the box score, it looks exactly like last year. Like
so sickening.
So much inefficiency, like to Odell. Landry does like okay, and it's like meh after that. Running backs don't do much. Kareem Hunt looks decent. Like it's the exact same thing as last year. It's
and Njoku getting hurt exactly like last year again too.
Yeah, exactly. Got to have now probably a rookie filling in for him. But yeah, I think Lamar, as he was last week, very similar price range. Like it's more so for me just going to be towards cash if you have the value to find it. Yeah, I'll have a couple lineups in GPPs and 150s. Last week I had like only 3 lineups of Lamar. It was just other opportunities for stacking looked better, higher upside there. But yeah, if you have the salary to go find him in cash, it's going to be like one of the safest spots that you can go towards. It's insane, the efficiency that keeps going. I mean, one game, but a 12% touchdown rate, 11 yards per attempt. Like it's going to have to regress. Like we're going to say that all year, but maybe it's just the way that he plays. He was pressured a ton in this game, like one of the highest pressure rates that he had. It was around 48%, which is the most that he's seen in his career. So I don't know if Yanda being out was all of that, trying to replace Marshall Yanda, probably going to be like a Hall of Famer with a bunch of rookies on the offensive line. We'll have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, Lamar going to be trying to start cash lineups there. And if there's enough value, I'll stick with it. He's
unreal right now. And, I remember when Michael Vick came back from prison, his first season with the Eagles was outstanding. And then they began to kind of identify how to slow him down on the ground. He wasn't in his prime form, but he still was good. And I feel like with Lamar Jackson, they still haven't figured out how to contain him on the ground. And it's just opening everything up through the air. He was sacked, I think. Yeah, he was sacked 2 times, but it didn't really matter. It just all in all, the guy is so productive and he's such a 2-way threat. He's so versatile that he's completing his passes at such a high clip. Sal, you're right. He can't continue at this rate. If he were to continue at this rate, he becomes the best quarterback to ever play the game pretty much. So
yeah, that's the thing. Like it's so high. Like Russell Wilson, we were like heading just on a pedestal for how efficient he's been. And this is like 2 tiers above what Russell Wilson has done for a little over a year now. So I think it's going to come down, but yeah, it's going to have to come from just his dual threat ability dropping. And right now it doesn't look like that's happening.
Ben, what are our thoughts on the other quarterbacks at the top here? I guess let's get through the 2 top price guys, and then we'll get into the 6K range where I think it's really going to open up. Patrick Mahomes, strong, efficient, solid showing in week 1 against the Houston team that has more holes than I identified on offense prior to the season getting underway. The Chargers, on the other hand, that game should have gone to overtime. Brutal missed 31-yard field goal. Joe Burrow had a decent enough game, but on the other side, the Chargers defense is still good, even without Derwin James. It's a solid secondary. The D-line is good enough to keep teams honest, but Patrick Mahomes is pretty expensive. I just think quarterback, and this is my opinion, is so deep this week that I can get to guys way cheaper and feel excellent about them.
No doubt. And we say that a lot. Of course, Sal summed it up. Like, if you have the money, these guys are as safe as they come. They're going to play well. Lamar, with his legs, and Mahomes seemingly never has a bad game. But the problem is you can save thousands of dollars and go to guys who are clearly not as good as them, but in terms of points per dollar, they can amass totals that those guys almost can't even match. So I usually pay down for quarterback. If I have the money, I'd love to get some of these upper tier guys. I just don't know if I'm going to pay. You have $800 difference from Mahomes to everybody else, and you have a $1,300 difference from Jackson to everyone else besides Mahomes. So they're in a tier by themselves. They should be, but I'm with you, Luffy. I'll try to take savings where I can.
And Ben, I've mentioned this a lot throughout the year leading up to the season. Sorry, that I had Devontae Adams being the number 1 fantasy receiver on the season. And again, we all will get plenty wrong. That's kind of how prognostication goes in football. But after watching week 1, Devontae Adams looked outrageously efficient. Minnesota's secondary looked outrageously weak. And I think we all kind of saw this coming. Sal touched on it a bunch last week when we just talked about how many guys they lost in the secondary. But Ben, Aaron Rodgers with a really impressive showing, really solid. Him and Devontae Adams, that connection, unbelievable. And you can only assume that, I know Sal hates Darius Slay, but with Slay gone and Mitchell Trubisky having a good second half against Detroit, Rodgers might be in a spot to put up solid numbers again. The question, though, comes back to, do we even need to go that high? Do we even need to go to 6,900?
I mean, again, it becomes a little easier, but I'm going to keep working down. You have buckets of guys that are, $500 to $1,000 cheaper than this. Now, Rodgers did look great, and we saw Trubisky. I mean, he didn't look good for the majority of the game, but when I guess it mattered, he did get it done and put up a really nice line against this Lions secondary. We'll see if they can get a little healthier, but they did not look good. So we're starting to get there. I'm not saying I won't have any Rodgers. I think he's certainly going to be more popular than week 1, but we haven't even mentioned, the Deshaun Watsons, the Matt Ryans, Kyler Murray, who had a huge game. There's a million guys as we work down that you could have interest in.
And I'll bring it over to you, Sal. The one guy that I think is going to keep ownership almost entirely off of Aaron Rodgers is priced $100 beneath him, goes by the name of Dak Prescott. He's got Amari Cooper. He's got Michael Gallup. He's got a quality rookie in CeeDee Lamb. And he's got Ezekiel Elliott, who's a solid bona fide pass catcher, maybe not the best, but good enough. Dak Prescott squaring off against an Atlanta team that just allowed Russell Wilson to complete almost every single pass. It was as easy sledding as you'll get as a quarterback, veteran or not. Now Dak Prescott gets this matchup at home against Atlanta in a game that's sporting a very high total in Dallas.
Yeah, and I'm going to lean there. I'm going to go with it even if the ownership's there. I like it at $6,800. So the one concern would be that Prescott was pressured like the most that he's probably been in his career behind this Dallas offensive line. Like no Lyle Collins, obviously Travis Frederick retires, and they had some issues. He was pressured on over 40% of his dropbacks, so that's a concern. They use play action a little bit more than they did last year. Like early on last year with Kellen Moore, they were using play action, and they were like 4-0 to start the season. Then they went away from it. So they're starting this year using play action. They lost the game, but the offense at least looked pretty decent, opened up some things for Zeke on the ground. So, yeah, I think Dak looks good. The clear stacking options. All three of those wide receivers look fine. Now that we kind of have confirmation that, yeah, CeeDee Lamb is going to be very much so involved in this offense, like right away, 90% of the snaps that he ran out of the slot. So I like Dak. He was fine in week 1, like 6.8 yards per attempt, and you just get all the stacking options that you want from him.
Aaron Donald had one play where he single-handedly took out 3 Dallas linemen, 3 of them took them out, but actually tossed them to the ground like rag dolls. I am with you in talking about Dallas's offensive line and the pressure, but I'm not as worried about Atlanta as I was with the Rams. Let's work it down a little bit further, Ben, and then we'll touch on running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, go through the positions here. Your boy Josh Allen's got Miami. Matt Ryan on the other side of this game against Dallas hit 450 yards last game. 450 yards on 54 pass attempts. Nothing has changed from the guy that averaged more pass attempts per game last year than any other quarterback. 54 attempts in game one. Sal mentioned that ownership's going to be there in this game, and there's no doubt about it. But my God, it's going to be really tough to get away from.
Yeah, it's a great game. Going to be popular. The over-under is 52.5 right now. Probably going to be the highest out there. But listen, Josh Allen, he's going to have a couple plays every game where you look and you're just like, how is this guy in the league? He missed John Brown. Talk about wide open. I don't know if you saw that play. He overthrew him. It was a short pass by about 6 to 10 feet. It's just unbelievable. But he's probably live for north of 10 carries again. He's going to take chances. And for fantasy purposes, give me 2 turnovers if he makes 2 giant plays on the other side. Like, those aren't going to hurt you. It doesn't matter. So I will look to Josh Allen, no problem. The question that I have is, are people going to go to Kyler Murray? He looked great. Big win for the Cardinals. I don't know, Luffy. The football team's defense, I almost got caught there. The football team's defense looked pretty good, especially with that pass rush. That's going to be an interesting spot at 6,100.
It is. And you know what? Let's do a little roundtable here. I'll throw it over to you, Sal. Their front seven was extraordinary. They sacked Carson Wentz 8 times. Had he not been a somewhat mobile quarterback able to escape pressure, they probably would have sacked him 12 times. And I'm not exaggerating. The thing is, though, and Sal, your thoughts, the thing is, I still have zero confidence in Washington's secondary. Like, early on, Carson Wentz was lighting them up, right? Easy passes, deep balls to Rager, to Dallas Goedert. The middle of the field was wide open. If the pocket is clean, if they can protect the quarterback, let's say Murray, and this is where we'll go to you, I think he can have a field day. But if they can't protect him, then that's going to be the biggest issue, because Washington's one and only line of defense, in my opinion, is that defensive line and their pass rush.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, their secondary was actually decent in this game, but a lot of that is going to have to do with just what their pass rush is able to produce. You're going to
ton of forced throws.
Exactly.
Yeah, like I'm saying, if it's a clean pocket, I do believe you're seeing a lot different secondary from Washington.
100%. I agree. I mean, I don't really know why they would look a lot better from last year. They didn't really change much pieces. Like, Moreu was awful last year, and he had a great week 1 because he just wasn't targeted. And when he was targeted, they were just rush throws, not efficient throws. So I like Kyler Murray a lot this week at 6,100. It looks too cheap. Like, he had 91 yards on the ground, so he still has that going for him. He played okay. I would say, like, at worst, okay against his 49ers defense. When you take into account, like, the expectations, he played great, I would say. All over Hopkins. He's actually going to have Christian Kirk freed up this week, who was just sacrificed to Richard Sherman. Like, it was brutal out there. Kirk couldn't even get anywhere, any separation at all. So yeah, Murray looks good. He was actually protected. Like, their offensive line was bad last year. People wanted them to take an offensive lineman in the first round. They ended up getting one in the 3rd round, who was probably a steal, and it was fine. They were protecting him. I think he was only pressured on like 20% of his dropbacks, which is well below what the average was in week 1. So yeah, the rushing upside, the price at 6,100, there's stacking options there as well. And yeah, I'm not really sold on Washington yet. I think they're better than people gave them credit for in week 1, at least their line. But yeah, I like Kyler Murray a lot right now.
We're going to be doing a whole lot more NFL content throughout the week, strategy shows every day, even on Saturday, on the contrary on Saturday, and then the deeper dive on Sunday. So, and live before lock. So just be sure to keep all of that in mind if we don't hit everything here. But I want to, before we go to running back, let's all pick out one other quarterback that we have interest in this week. I will go first. There are so many of them that I feel like this list could go on forever. We could probably spend 2 hours talking about quarterbacks. That's not hyperbole. We really could. But I'm going to go with Phillip Rivers. Just unbelievably terrible loss. I'm assuming people in survivor pools got rocked on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
Losing the Colts, 49ers. Who was the other? Wasn't there another big one too?
The Eagles, I'm sure
The
some
Eagles,
people took.
Yep. The Eagles. And Carson Wentz, I just can't trust him right now, especially if Lane Johnson doesn't return. But with Phillip Rivers, talk about a Jekyll and Hyde type mixed bag performance. He completed all but 10 of his 46 passes, 363 yards. This team had like 500 total yards, something insane. He only had one touchdown and got picked off twice in typical Phillip Rivers fashion. But the Minnesota Vikings were an absolute sieve defensively, coughing up anything Rodgers and Adams and Lazard and Valdez-Scantling wanted. I think Rivers can come into this game, and I would expect to see somewhat of a shootout here. I don't love Rivers at this stage of the game in his career, but sub 6K, I could see another huge passing performance, and they lost Marlon Mack. He might have to rely on him a lot. Sal, go ahead. Who do you have?
Yeah, I'm going to go with, it's between two guys, but I'll go with Tom Brady right now at 6,500. A lot of this is going to come down to Mike Evans' health. Mike Evans ran 39 rounds, banged up though, had to face Lattimore. If he gets him freed up a little bit more, it's easier to stack with the price points. And the matchup against Carolina, they just got destroyed in every facet by the Raiders on the ground, in the air, every part of the game. Their defense is as advertised. That's why they spent 7 draft picks on their defense. It's not good. So I'll go with Tom Brady at 6,500 versus Carolina.
How about you, Ben?
I'll double down. Like probably the dumbest thing that I could do is take what I weaseled out of Mitch Trubisky late and double down on him. But he does draw the Giants at home. Juju was running free for various parts of the game last night. I think Allen Robinson to Trubisky once again is very viable. He's dirt cheap. We can all make jokes. And he was terrible for a large part of that game. Look at that box score. He got you there easily. He was actually a big asset on a lot of teams last week. It wasn't pretty, but he got it done.
All right. Anything else at quarterbacks that you guys want to hit on? Like I said, throughout the week, we're going to have a whole lot more coming up. But if there's anything you think is pressing right now for people that are getting in on their research, speak now or forever hold your peace.
I'll just say I like Jared Goff. I won't break down too much into it, but I just like Jared Goff's price point, and a lot looked good in week 1, including his protection.
Okay. Now it's time to have some fun. The running back position's got a lot going on this week, a lot of moving parts. And I'll come out of the gate saying that once again, I don't anticipate myself getting to a lot of Christian McCaffrey. I don't even know how much Elliott I'm going to have, although I wouldn't blame anybody for that. Saquon Barkley last night was incredibly underwhelming, and a lot of that was the Pittsburgh defense was in the backfield by the time the ball was snapped. So I don't want to put all of that on his shoulders. But Ben, the first player that really stood out to me, and don't worry, we've got a lot of running backs to touch on, was Derrick Henry. He was super inefficient yesterday, and he still had 31 carries for 116 yards. He even hauled in all three of his passing targets, which was a little bit encouraging. But 31 carries, despite the inefficiency. He was even getting carries late in the game with less than a minute remaining as they drove down the field. Now you've got him against this Jacksonville team that lost Ngakoue, that lost Calais Campbell. I don't know how, even as a non-pass catcher, I don't know how it's sub 8K. I can't fall in love with Henry this week. If he had 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, I honestly wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, listen, this guy, the great thing about him too, is when you're reliant, we talked about this with Josh Jacobs a little, and he also upped the receiving stats, but it's like, okay, you need the game script because if they start falling behind, he could get phased out. That's not going to happen with Tennessee. Even when they're trailing, they go to him.
Right.
Yes, now if they're down 30 points, that's not going to happen though. So Henry's game script proof, and when you're getting the ball upwards of 30 times against this front, it's a matter of time, and that's what the Titans do. It's 3 yards, 3 yards, 3 yards. And then he breaks one. You don't know when it's going to be, but he gets there even when he doesn't get there. That sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. So he's probably my favorite running back on the slate when you factor in price.
Very enticing. Plus, he won you like $250,000.
That was against
so
the
that
Jaguars,
didn't hurt, right?
Yeah. So
What'd you say?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
And it was against the Jaguars that game.
Was it?
It certainly was.
All right. So we're going back to the well, and I'm riding your coattails on this one.
Yeah.
Sal, what do you say of these top-priced guys?
Yeah, I would say that the first one last week, it was tough to get McCaffrey in a lot of lineups. I had him in a good amount of GPPs, really couldn't fit him in cash. It didn't make much sense. So, I mean, you could say what you want, 65 snaps out of 68 running back snaps, he's okay. But the guy that I'd probably jump to first would be Zeke if I'm going to be going there. it's neck and neck with Henry for me right now. Zeke had 26 opportunities. Henry had 34. They're both going to be in fine game scripts this week, both being touchdown favorites or bigger at this point. I just like what I'm seeing right now in the matchup against Atlanta one and just overall usage everywhere. Zeke looked good. He broke 5 tackles. He had 5 evaded tackles, 66 yards after contact. He ran 28 routes, all parts of the game. He was pretty much featured in this offense. $82, I think it's a fair price point for him. It would have been a more difficult choice if Saquon came out last night and looked amazing. He looked okay for what he could do, but that line is just terrifying. So yeah, Zeke is the first one that stands out, probably above like that 8K or that Derrick Henry and above range for me.
Man, I'm really, really fascinated by one player here in the 6,500 range, and I don't want to gloss over these other guys. So if you guys want to hit on them, we can do that too. But on the Tuesday show, we like to move around a little bit. Austin Eckler. I think people are going to be soured on him after what we saw last time out. Only one target, which is really quite shocking. You know, there's always the concerns. Hey, a rushing quarterback into Rod Taylor, it's going to limit the amount of passing opportunities. Not only that, though, you had Joshua Kelly, who I believe got the final 12 carries over the last 24 minutes of this game. There are some concerns. However, I still have no issues getting to Eckler. He played 68% of the snaps to begin with. And in a spot like this against the Kansas City Chiefs, they will not have the luxury of leaving Eckler out of the passing game. I think you're going to see him a lot more involved in this spot. His price is $6,500. That's very reasonable. He did also see 19 carries, which is super encouraging. In a game where I don't expect them to be leading, and I do expect them to be playing with a deficit, my anticipation or expectation is that Eckler goes and begins to see his opportunities tick back up as a pass catcher. So 6,500, I think you'll get lower ownership here, and I'm going to be all over it. Sal, what are we thinking in the mid-range?
Yeah, I'll echo that. Eckler, I mean, he had 20 touches. It was like the most hated 20 touches that a running back's ever gotten in his life. So a little bit concerned that he wasn't in there around the goal line when Kelly was. Not sure if there's anything to that. They had some stuff in camp that they were talking about, but I'll say that right now I'll lean towards Kenyon Drake and Jonathan Taylor at the top of the 5K range. I like Drake, 18 opportunities in week 1. He's going to be in the fast-paced spot, 25 routes run. Everything kind of checked out in what is now going to be a better matchup than last week against the 49ers. I think he's too cheap there. I probably will put him in like groups with Kyler Murray. I'm not sure yet. But then Jonathan Taylor is like probably burying the league, but he just got announced as a starter. I think it was pretty obvious, and he came out and looked fantastic. Not sure if he's going to be as amazing in the passing game efficient-wise, 13 routes, 6 receptions, 6 targets, but I'd be expecting like a minimum of 15 touches with the upside of 20+. In a matchup where you just saw Minnesota get poached in the secondary, and even up front against Aaron Jones, an efficient game was given up to all the Packers running backs. So I think Taylor right now is standing out as like maybe the best running back play, and I assume ownership will follow it.
I was wondering about this, and I guess we could ask you too, Ben. Do you think Jonathan Taylor will be the one to garner most of this ownership?
Yeah, I think he'll garner most of the ownership, but I don't. There's something about I was really heavy on Mac, and that was terribly unfortunate.
That sucked. He had like 60 yards when he went down too.
Yeah, it was just a freak injury. I don't know exactly what they're going to do with Hines, though. He's a tricky guy to figure out. They seem to be comfortable throwing him in spots where I wouldn't, normally I'd just peg him, if they're trailing here and there. But they use him at various points that don't really fit the mold. So although I definitely see the merit for Jonathan Taylor, there are other guys. There's a lot of guys in similar spots. Like Ronald Jones has that kind of a same situation.
I love him I love Ronald Jones this week.
Like finally he's starting to show that he can be a top back, and Fournette didn't show much. I feel pretty comfortable that the volume will be there. I'm going to try to save at quarterback partially so I can get pretty high on running back. I didn't love a ton of value there. Those guys up top are such good players. I want to try to get 2 of them in a lot of lineups.
The way I see it with Ronald Jones is he played. You look at the snaps, right? LaShawn McCoy played a decent amount of snaps, 36%. Leonard Fournette with 13, but McCoy and Leonard Fournette were largely ineffective. almost entirely. Bruce Arians kept his word. People were worried. Hey, you're bringing in Fournette, you're bringing in McCoy. Is Ronald Jones going to be that guy? Arians says he is the workhorse. We'll see what happens. Well, he kept his word, and Ronald Jones, maybe it wasn't the greatest game, but you go from a matchup against the Carolina or against New Orleans to the Carolina Panthers, who just ceded 3 touchdowns to Josh Jacobs, maybe a few less rushing yards than you would have anticipated. But all in all, what a good bounce back spot for Ronald Jones, who saw 17 carries and 20 total looks in this game. 5,200. If he comes in underowned, I'm all over that, especially as I think they're 9-point favorites last I looked, something insane. Tampa Bay is
9.5.
Is it 9.5? Dude, give me that all day long. I don't really agree with that line, but I still think they should be favored by a touchdown. Sal, anybody else in the 5K range you like?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of names. I'll echo like kind of just the opposite side of the Colts. I think Nyheim Hines is definitely still in play at $5,300 he ran 28 routes last week. I can't really see that going below 20 routes, even if he's not named the quote unquote starter. And then not at 5K range, but 6K flat. Just keep an eye on Miles Sanders' health status. Apparently, like speculations that he probably could have played if it was like a really desperate game that they needed him to play last week. They just didn't run him out there. Yeah, and it turned out to be very important. So yeah, I mean, if $6,000 flat Miles Sanders goes out there, tougher matchup against the Rams D line, but you know that he's going to be used in the passing game. And then Melvin Gordon, keep an eye on Philip Lindsay. Seems like he has turf toe, which if that's the case, that's like at least a month recovery, somewhere around there, 2 to 4 weeks. So Gordon, like he did last week or last night, really had all the work. I would expect it again.
How much is Melvin Gordon here?
Tough matchup, but 5,200.
It's really not a bad price. And these are some of those spots where you have to be willing to look, you have to be willing to factor ownership in really heavily. Like if Gordon was the same ownership as Ronald Jones and Jonathan Taylor, I'd want none of him at all. Yeah. But you know, if we're coming into a situation where he's getting no ownership and he has sole possession of the backfield, I'd be willing to take a look. But that Pittsburgh defensive line, run stopping and pass rush, they look really good, man. That is once again a fantastic defense. So I thought Denver defense looked really good as well. I was really impressed by them actually. And obviously they need to send a gift basket to Stephen Gostkowski, but that's besides the point. Ben, I want to ask you about the Bills backfield, Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. Another spot where it was a bit of a mixed bag. Zach Moss saw 10 looks inside the red zone, only 2 for Devin Singletary. But then Devin Singletary saw 59% of snaps and 45 for Zach Moss. But I'm a little bit concerned for Singletary that he had to produce everything pretty much through the air.
It's tough. You know, there's too many games on the slate for me to really try. This is the classic, and we talk about this probably once a show. I'm not going to try to get it right multiple times. Like Josh Allen could run it in. They could go through the air. Maybe they do establish something on the ground. Then even if that's true, you have a coin flip of is it Moss or Singletary? That's just too many hurdles for me to try to get through. There's a million guys right above them that I feel more comfortable with. Or if you wanted to go down to I don't really have a strong take on Snell for the Steelers. We'll see what the deal is. I don't think I'm going to have a massive leverage stand. I want to see how popular he is, but he's someone to consider if you're desperate, obviously.
Yeah, he is. I don't like that. Derrick Henry had 116 carries, but let's not mistake that for efficiency because they bottled him up in the backfield a lot last night. I have a lot of respect for what I saw out of Denver against one of the most bruising backs in the entire league. Sal, let's wrap this up with some value, guys. I just want to throw a couple names at you, see where you're standing. Cam Akers had opportunities, but it doesn't look great when Malcolm Brown's running all over Dallas and you are getting bottled up at every turn. Benny Snell, Ben just mentioned. Another one would be James Robinson, who actually had 62 yards on 16 carries. Not efficient, but he did actually get the bell cow type status. Peyton Barber, super inefficient, but he was the preferred option in the backfield there. Just throwing all these names at you of cheap guys that we can talk about because there are a lot of them. It's just so many of them got a lot of work and did virtually nothing with it below this 5K range.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think they're in great spots. Like Robinson is the one who workload wise stands out, but like a 16 implied team total, 10-point underdogs in this spot, and he only ran 11 routes. So he's very one dimensional and touchdown dependent, which I'm not willing to go down there. One name that I'll call it for just GPPs is he's minimum price now at running back. Tevin Coleman, they have 3 running backs, so I don't really want to play them. If I want to play one, it's usually the cheapest one. And now he's the cheapest. He only played 6 snaps because of what they're saying is now the air quality there. He almost missed the game. So McKinnon looked good, so it doesn't really help Coleman, but he's minimum price 4K. And if he's going to be all fine and the air quality is better, it's probably somewhere where you'll see him more times than not see like 8 to 12 touches there. So that's about it. My stance on Snell is that Samuel saw all the passing game work. Denver was number 1 in run defense last year, and it looked just as stout, holding Henry at like 3.5 yards a carry. So I'm not going to have much interest in Snell overall. If you want it for like cash opportunity of like 15 to 16 touches, that's okay. But I'd probably fade it in GPPs if Connor is going to miss time.
And it's unfortunate, but you've got some injuries and just very little wiggle room to where you're looking to go. For example, the New York Jets, it looks like Le'Veon Bell probably doesn't play this week, but who are your alternatives? Frank Gore, even Pirine is looking like he's going to be out. So, or I believe he already is out. So, ultimately you don't really have a ton of space to get excited about anyone in this backfield. And then factor in they're going up against San Francisco. There's just not a ton of value at the position right now.
Not at all. And it's just, again, I don't feel the need to reach. You can structure lineups. I know it's early on a Tuesday, but just at first glance, you can absolutely structure lineups where you have 2 pretty secure running backs and the opportunity cost is not immense at the other positions.
Okay.
That sums it up.
Miles Sanders and Ronald Jones will be the death of me. I feel it in my bones.
Ronald Jones is always.
It
never works out.
Before that, Ben? Were you saying something before that?
No, I was just ranting about Ronald Jones.
Oh, okay. I thought you said something about a thumbs up. Well, I'll say it.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking it.
You were. I swear you said it. I don't know. Hit that thumbs up, guys. Got 260 watching. Appreciate all of the support. It is the simplest and best way to help support us. And if you guys haven't used the promo yet, this is the time. It expires after today. It is a fantastic way to dip your feet in the Awesemo.com waters by using the promo code at checkout, REDZONE, all one word, REDZONE. It'll get you 50% off your whole first week of Awesemo Plus NFL subscription. Ownership, player projections, top stack tool, all of our premium content and articles, our lineup builder. You can get the Fantasy Cruncher add-on. Remember, we don't just stick Alex Baker's name on this, right? He's the number 1 ranked DFS player in the world for a reason. And why? Because of the tools that are on this site, the tools that he developed, that he put on the site, that he uses himself. That is where the success comes from. And you can look at our Awesemo Hall of Fame page. You can look at the testimonials. We've had tons of huge winners using these tools that have had immense success, but also become better overall players, really learn the ins and outs of becoming better tournament players at Awesemo.com and all of that good stuff. So Red Zone, all one word at checkout, $7.50 for the entire week of Awesemo Plus NFL content. There's no better time to jump in than now. Check that out at checkout, Red Zone, all one word. All right, so let's keep it moving here. Ben, want to talk some wide receivers?
Let's do it.
We have to start with Davante Adams because the guy's an absolute monster. 14 of 17 for 156 and 2 touchdowns. And he's probably going to do that a couple more times this season. That's not hyperbole. I'm serious. I think you're going to get some absolutely gigantic performances from Davante Adams all season long if he stays healthy.
Oh, there's no doubt. He is just, it's seemingly every week, safe as they come for cash. The other thing, I don't know why Michael Thomas sometimes is on an island. Like Michael Thomas is like 9,500. He's 9,000. Davante Adams, he never broaches that, or he certainly hasn't yet. 8,100 is very reasonable. I know he's the top price guy on this wide receiver slate, but you can make room for him. Now he's going to be extremely popular coming off last game. He should be extremely popular though. So it's not like, to me, it's bad chalk, but clearly you're not going to be gaining leverage if you plug in Adams and build around him.
talk to me about Devontae Adams. And if you want to bleed that conversation into these other 7K plus guys, Sal, we can do that, because DeAndre Hopkins, all of us said on Tuesday, hey, if DeAndre Hopkins is coming in at low ownership at $6,800, there's no reason not to consider him. Now, I don't think any of us thought he would have 16 looks, 14 receptions, and 151 yards against the 49ers, but the guy is a human cheat code. That is what he does. And then you've got Tyreek Hill, Julio Jones, Adam Thielen, who is also the lone soldier in that wide receiving corps over at Minnesota. He had 110 and 2 scores, some really big games from these guys. And I've got to tell you, I'll even throw Chris Godwin into the mix. I think these guys, and Julio Jones, I think all of them warrant their price tags and might actually be a little bit more affordable than I expected.
Yeah, all the studs look good. Adams had like 43% of the team's air yards, a 41.5% target share if you exclude the throwaways from Rodgers. Just nuts. On 43 routes run, he still had 3.63 yards per route run, which is like what guys do on like 5 routes. It was insane how efficient he remained that whole game. So yeah, it's going to be hard to get all these guys to be as high on them as last week because all their price points go up like $1,000, $800 for each of them. But yeah, it's hard not to like Adams. Julio and Hopkins, you could say the same thing about. All the studs showed out last week. Julio, 12 targets. Hopkins comes right out of nowhere or just right onto this team with a 51% air yards, like 45% target share. I like all of them. They all have another set of good matchups. I don't know who's going to guard Adams. Okuda was out last week. I don't think it matters. Same exact thing for Julio and Hopkins. It's just pick your poison with these guys up here. It's the easiest to get to Julio because of the price. I think his stacking options in that Atlanta game, there's a lot of them. So I would expect to have the most Julio right away. But I like all of them. And yeah, I'm going to go right back to Godwin. I had him last week. It's an even better matchup this week. And if Evans gets healthier, less attention on him and easier to stack that whole team up.
Ben, these guys at the top, and Sal just did a pretty good job laying it out for many of them. They're all the type of players that can blow the roof off of a tournament. That can break slates, so to speak, right? Chris Godwin, I love him with Brady this year. He's a yards after the catch guy. He's going to be, in my opinion, I think he will be the primary target, not Scotty Miller. I don't know, call me crazy. Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley are probably the most dynamic quarterback or wide receiver tandem in the league. There's going to be a lot of decisions to make in this range, even if you were to work down to Ridley at 6,800 and a couple of these other guys, but from 6,800 and up, there are a lot of decisions to make.
Oh, there's a ton of decisions to make. The one thing I find interesting, though, and Sal touched upon this, almost all these guys got you there. They certainly didn't hurt you if you rostered them last week. Like Michael Thomas is not on the slate. He was the big bust. So I feel like people are going to be pretty incentivized to go right back. Ownership should flatten. But the guy I want to point out, and he's probably my least favorite, but I think he's going to be the least favorite for the field. It's Tyreek Hill, who, if there's a guy who can break a slate, it is him. He wasn't on the slate, of course, because they played on Thursday. He was pretty quiet. If all these other guys suck up all the ownership and Tyreek Hill is like 7%, something very low, that is a spot to attack because we know that he has as high of upside as anybody, especially at low ownership.
I so badly want to disagree with you on this, but it's difficult to. He could take the top off any defense, even if they're as good as the Chargers. So yeah, I don't know, Sal, the way I see it is I'd be shocked if Hill wasn't way lower owned than Adams and Hopkins and Julio, probably Thielen and Godwin and even Ridley too. I think of all of them, he'll be the lowest owned. Maybe I'm wrong though. Maybe people still love going there because of the upside.
Yeah, I think he'll probably be the lowest owned just looking at it on first look, but they're all so close in price, like a $200 difference to the next guy that it might just be like across the board. It's like a 10 to 15% owned on all of them. And you're not really gaining too much leverage from like a straight out fade if you just want them as like a one-off.
I really like Adams. I really like Hopkins. Julio and Ridley in a stack in a game that could see 70 combined points. What about Thielen? Do you guys want to add anything to Adam Thielen here, knowing that, you know, he probably sees, do you think he sees roads?
So I think that what you're probably going to get from Thielen is it's going to be a mixture. Like they rarely will like shadow anything. Yeah. Like they'll rarely shadow anything. It'll be like 30% all over the place. Thielen sometimes will move into the slot if they go 3 wide receiver sets, but it's hard not to like Thielen. He was the only thing that he was getting looks at like downfield. He had 55% of the team's air yards. I think that was the most out of anybody week one except for Will Fuller. So all the opportunity in the world for Thielen there. The price point is like the only thing that could be a little bit restrictive, and I don't really know how much I'm going to stack Minnesota. So I have interest in the Colts side of it. So he'll probably be like a run back option. So I think I'll actually get a decent amount of Thielen.
Yeah, I would have honestly thought that Thielen would have had more opportunity. And you talk about target share here. He had 8 targets, but did you see how little Kirk Cousins threw in this game?
Yeah.
What did he have? 25 attempts, I think it was.
Yeah, and it was like it was no, that's right. And it was all in like desperation time where they were just it seemed like the Packers defense just gave up. They were up 3 touchdowns and they just gave up a touchdown in like 1 minute. It happened twice in the fourth quarter, and Thielen ended up benefiting a lot in that fourth quarter.
Yeah. So mind you, Thielen still had a 32% market share of targets, despite Cousins only throwing 25 times. Would you rather have a guy that has a 25% market share and his quarterback throws 40 times a game? Yeah, but I think you're not going to, even though they want to run the ball more, Ben, they're not going to be able to only throw 20 to 25 times a game. This was the same thing last year. You remember earlier in the year, Cousins wasn't throwing at all, and then they had to pick it up a little bit because outside of Dalvin Cook, what else? Like if he's not getting it going, you're going to need to start throwing the football. So I can get back here as well. Do you want to round out anything else at the top, Ben? If not, we can work our way into the 6K range.
No, I mean, I'll just simply say this is, to me, one of the more important spots for ownership. If it's best available and ownership is flat, I will be going with Adams and Hopkins and Julio like most. If I'm getting 1/4 of the ownership, 1/5 of the ownership on a guy like Tyreek Hill, I will roll the dice on some teams just because I don't think the gap is that big.
Steven says, Laffy's boy Ridley had a strong game. Yes, he did. Steven, I can't tell you how much content I did on him this offseason, just as a breakout guy. It's not like I was where other people weren't. Anybody that's paid attention to what he's been able to do through his first 2 seasons should know that the breakout was on its way. I said the same thing about Noah Fant yesterday. I think Noah Fant's going to have a huge year in Denver. There's just a few of those guys that you see it coming. Sal, let's talk 6K guys. This is always where it gets kind of fun. Kenny Golladay, if he plays with can shed that nagging hamstring injury, he's down at 6,200. Will Fuller, very difficult matchup. Does he have the speed to beat this Baltimore team? Is it worth it? Probably not. Amari Cooper, I think, is one of the most overrated fantasy players in the world, but he's also pretty cheap. I'm a big Michael Gallup guy as well. And my assumption is that these guys at their prices are too inexpensive and are going to get a ton of opportunity or a ton of ownership. But through and through, even if we took it from like $5,500 and up, there's a lot to talk about here for sure.
Yeah, definitely a lot to talk about. Like right at that $6,300 price range, there's like 6 receivers and they all look pretty appealing to me. I think Evans is probably going to be the one I get the most ownership towards if we can just get a little bit more confidence about his health. He played a full role last week. I'm assuming the injury limited him some, but Marshawn Lattimore just shuts that guy down every time. Like he held him last year to a goose egg. He held him this week to like 1 catch, although limited, but he ran 39 routes. So yeah, Evans at $6,400. That's just, I mean, that could be arguably $1,000 too cheap if he was healthy last week. And now maybe the best matchup that he'll see all season long against the Panthers. So I'm going to like Evans. There's a bunch of guys right there at that price point. I currently have as with like a check mark to play, or at least try and get into stacks, something along those lines. In Allen Robinson, DJ Moore, Robert Woods is going to be the big one. Robert Woods was the #1 wide receiver in yards per reception last week. He had like 15 yards per reception. If you watch any of the Sunday night game, literally like the first 2 minutes, they were just designing plays on the first drive for him left and right. And yeah, the offensive line gave Goff time. They ran a ton of play action. Everything looked good from the game plan in week 1. And I think he's going to have a fine spot this week, nothing that I'll shy away from. So I think Woods at 6,400 and Evans at 6,400 I like. And then we start to get to, in that 5K range, some of the Colts guys, and that's where T.Y. Hilton pops up in a really good matchup. We just saw and talked about Minnesota, how bad they were. I don't know how they improve after 1 week.
Yeah, that is the biggest thing on my mind too. I don't know how they improve. Ben, what else are we seeing here in the mid-range?
Yeah, the wide receiver is so deep this week. There's a bunch of guys at similar price points. It's just about really small margins, whether it's ownership, where it's stacking. Guys like Amare and Gallup, they get a huge boost because of the game environment. Whereas then you have guys like, to me, Allen Robinson. I think he might be a little lower owned just because he's one of the few big time receivers that didn't play great last week. it was more Anthony Miller, especially late. So I'll look to these same guys. Fuller would be the really aggressive pivot. I think that's a little much. Luffy, you've spoken at length. I mean, Odell did absolutely nothing last week against this. The Ravens are just
disgrace.
good. Not saying that they can't have success over the top, but it feels like an unnecessary risk given that it's not just a simple pivot. He has to beat like 5 guys ahead of him. And I seriously doubt that one of those more obvious guys doesn't get going and get out there.
Yes, I'm with you. It's also time for us to talk about these Eagles pass catchers. Here's why. I think Carson Wentz is going to be the highest ceiling, lowest floor quarterback in the league this year. I think you are going to, and by that, I mean the difference between his floor and ceiling is going to be, and obviously I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's going to be astronomical. So if you look at this last game, Deshaun Jackson was targeted on deep balls. Where is it? He was targeted on deep balls 4 times. Jalen Reagor was targeted 2 times on deep balls. Point being is that Carson Wentz attempted 8 deep attempts, and that's with the entire offensive line banged up. You have to consider only 8 deep attempts with that line and so much pressure and no time to work. Sal, my guess is that when Lane Johnson returns and they find ways to fix this offensive lineup a little bit, what's going to happen is you are going to see Carson Wentz taking shot after shot after shot. And some days he's not going to connect. But on those days where he is, like the first half of the Washington game, you're going to get some huge games. Even Dallas Goedert was targeted downfield on a couple of these as well. I'm really fascinated by this offense. There are going to be weeks where it's very bad, and I think there are going to be weeks where it's very good. If this is one of those weeks, it might not be, but if it is, you're going to want to have some pieces of these guys. My guess, they're also very low owned after week 1's debacle.
Yeah, and I like them both. I think I like Reagor a little bit more, just the price point of $4,100. And yeah, him and Jackson both ran 30 routes. He played barely more snaps, but they went, as always, just heavy 2 tight end sets, and that's where it was Reagor and Jackson on the outside for a lot of it. It's hard not to like them. Like a 26.5 point opening total right now for a team total. They're favorites in this one. So everything seen last week was how bad the line was. I'm expecting the line to be healthier by next week. I mean, if we don't have any news on that, then that's one thing, because this Rams defensive line brought pressure. They were top 5 in week 1 with pressure rate. But yeah, I'm going to operate as if the line's going to be healthier. And like you mentioned, just deep passes, you're going to get more of those. You're probably going to get just more overall targets for these receivers in general because of just the fact that nothing was opening up downfield. So yeah, right now Reagor's on my list at $4,100. If you want to stack the Eagles, I'm fine doing that. Just track the offensive line stuff. But everything from what Vegas is saying is be confident in the Eagles this week when the public is not. It looks like a really good edge spot.
All right. What are you doing with some of the value options, Ben? It's still very early, obviously. We don't have ownership, but initial first take.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we'll see if anything opens up with injuries and other things. But to me, as we go lower, this is a spot where I'll look to teams that either had, just an ugly week 1 or players like, Sal early in the show mentioned Christian Kirk. I'm not going to overreact to 1 week. There's matchups. Some guys just don't have it. And then you look at the Colts with T.Y. Hilton, Paris Campbell, guys like that. You can steal some salary. Their price, they would be more popular and higher owned with a couple little things that went differently. So I'm not going to panic. And I'll kind of just stick to the formula. We'll see with some of these secondaries if they can make strides, but that's not something that you really flip a switch with. Like you have the guys you have. The teams that struggle in the secondary, they're probably going to struggle in the secondary most weeks. So just attack those games with the good game scripts. Look for a little salary relief, particularly with the Colts.
Any other discount value here, Sal, that we need to get into?
Yeah, Paris Campbell, I like a lot at 4,500. He kind of operated as Philip Rivers' number 1. It was like an instant connection, 9 targets in the slot, looked very good, played 95% of his snaps out of the slot.
Does that worry you about T.Y. Hilton?
I don't think so. I think that they can both coexist, especially if they're going to throw as much as they did. But, this is a team that does want to run first in situations. But I would be leaning right now, like in this week specifically, like, yeah, the price discount, I do like Campbell. Campbell's like a slot. Yeah, like Campbell's like a slot plus guy. Like I'm not going to talk about his route running as being fantastic. But if you want to talk about like Chris Godwin, big bodied slot receivers, that's exactly what Campbell embodies. And Rivers was looking to him nonstop. Now, Hilton still had 9 targets. I think he has more upside on the outside. But when it comes to the red zone, I think that Campbell is going to quickly become this team's number 1 option. And it's very appealing as he remains cheap in this matchup. And then, yeah, I'll just second it on Christian Kirk. He's going to go from probably the worst matchup that he's had in his career against Richard Sherman and just being sacrificed there to a lot better of a spot this week. I think it was like a week before the season. Like Calvin Ridley was like so many, like you were all over him, so many people's darlings just for the season. I try to stir up some trouble and just say, I can't wait for Christian Kirk to outproduce Calvin Ridley this year. I don't see the difference between the two players.
Slow start.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was a bold take, and I don't even know if I believed it myself, but I like Kirk a lot. I really do see the comparisons between the two player situations, but really I do things better. But the amount of people that bookmark that tweet and in the fourth quarter of this first game just put a comment back on that one. So now I'm really rooting for Kirk. But no, I actually like the situation. Stacking options. He's cheap, and he might be the player number one in the league that nobody wants to play right now.
First of all, I'm a Christian Kirk truther. I really, really like Christian Kirk, and I expect him to have a very solid campaign. Another year for Kyler Murray, Cliff Kingsbury with the second year coaching under his belt. There's a lot to like here, for sure. I just like Calvin Ridley a lot more. But you know what, Sal?
Yeah,
would be the craziest thing. Okay. Let me ask you this. What would you be satisfied with at the end of the year for Christian Kirk? Receptions, yards, touchdowns.
Satisfied with, I think probably somewhere around like 100. I mean, over 100 targets, I'd be satisfied with that. Probably around like 110, 115. Yardage, right around like 900, 950, pushing 1,000, and touchdowns right around 5 to 6. That's what I would feel really good about. Like he was drafted wide receiver 40 overall when Ridley was going like wide receiver 16. So I think that was the big thing I was hitting on. But the situations are a lot alike. An alpha receiver in front of you, really high-powered offense that are going to throw a lot, and two studs. I think Ridley right now in his career is better, but I think they're a lot closer than that like 25 difference from at least season-long perspectives.
Okay, fair enough. Ben, do you want to get to anybody else from a value standpoint? Because I'm going to throw one more out there. If you guys hit on it already, my apologies. Trying to read this chat and follow along with both. Anthony Miller is interesting to me. I'm just not convinced that the New York Giants, there were some real issues there yesterday. I thought they would be improved in the secondary. Bradbury was quiet, and then you had Juju Smith-Schuster, the happiest man in the world to have Roethlisberger back. Once Roethlisberger shook off that rust, dusted himself off in the second half, they really owned that game. So I did like what I saw from Anthony Miller. By the way, Allen Robinson was targeted on 5 times downfield. 20 plus yards downfield. That's a lot. 5 times 20 plus yards downfield. Only had 1 catch for 22 yards, but his deep percentage was 56%. So 56% of his targets were 20 plus yards downfield. I was happy to see that. Anthony Miller was targeted 3 times downfield, 20 plus yards. So half of his targets were deep balls as well. And those are things I like to see. I like the ceiling. I like that upside, Ben. In tournaments, I'm willing to go with the boom or bust approach.
No doubt. And listen, this is where week 2 always presents that opportunity. Like if Allen Robinson would have caught a couple extra deep balls, it'd be a totally different conversation. But when you really think about it, is he more likely to catch them this week if he caught them last week? To me, the answer is no. But the ownership would be up, the price would be up, and things like that are where I'm not going to overreact just to 1 week. And I watched that Bears game intently. I had a lot of positions on it. He had a massive opportunity. And if he sees that every week, I will gladly buy, particularly in this matchup against the Giants.
I'm sorry, did you say Miller or Robinson? Miller?
I was talking about Robinson, but it's the same concept with Miller. Miller was fortunate enough to cash in late in the game last week. But both of them, if they're going to see those type of opportunities, the floors are going to be low, but the ceilings, they will have some big weeks despite Trubisky at quarterback.
Some good and bad about Miller too, Sal. The really good is that he averaged 3.45 yards per route run yesterday. That was one of the highest on the week, Sunday. But he also only ran 22 routes. So that's definitely something I would want to see come up if we're going to have the confidence that he can, have 10 target games from time to time. And Robinson ran 36. So that's one thing I'd like to see improve, but the upside's there.
Yeah, something I found weird. I don't know if it's going to stay the same. Like Miller mainly runs out of the slot. They put Jimmy Graham in the slot a lot, and Miller wasn't on the field. So that's not great. If they keep doing that, it makes no sense from a coaching perspective unless they thought they had a matchup. But Graham played like 15 snaps out of the slot, and Miller just came off the field on like half of those.
Yeah, that sucked. All right. I can't imagine they continue doing that because Mitch Trubisky seemed to really like getting the ball to Robinson, and Robinson made big plays as a result. All right, tight ends. I'll stick with you, Sal. Travis Kelce, George Kittle. That definitely hurt me this week. I was really high on Kittle in this game. They had nobody else, and he ends up getting hurt. Comes back, but wasn't the same. It clearly wasn't the same. He's got a sprained left knee, not what you're looking for, coming off a monster 1,100-yard season. Now, assuming he plays, he's got a matchup against the Jets, Kelce against the Chargers. And then I'll throw the other 6K guy in here, Mark Andrews on the road against the Houston Texans. Those are our guys at 7K, 67, and 6,300 respectively.
Yeah, I think the one that I'm going to look to, at least to start the week the most, is going to be Mark Andrews. He had the best week last week, so I assume that most people just go right back to him since he had 2 touchdowns. But he was used really efficiently. Like, this is the most snaps we've ever seen Mark Andrews play. Maybe it has something to do with Hayden Hurst not there. Maybe it's just them making a conscious effort to get him on the field more. But 5 catches, 86 yards, 2 touchdowns. He has a strong matchup this week. He was targeted 4 times out of the slot, which was good to see. So everything they used him for him, why you spent like a 4th or 5th round season-long pick on him, was exactly the reason in this game. So like a 30 implied team total. He looks the best out of all those pay-up options. I don't think there's anything wrong with Kelce or Kittle. It's just the value for the price point. I think coming into this week, they all look pretty identical. So I'll just take the cheapest one when it comes to the price point.
Okay. Ben, what about you?
So I'd agree. If I had to pick amongst I guess we'd call them the big 3, it would be Andrews is the cheapest. Lamar and him just have that connection, it seems. I'm going to stick with my theme, though, I guess, of the week. I'm going back to Evan Ingram. He had a lot, 7 targets yesterday, and the Steelers defense, that's as bad as it's going to get. I'm not saying the Bears is a great matchup, but it's certainly better than the Steelers. And Daniel Jones is going to be looking to him. He's a matchup problem for most teams. He had his opportunities. He just, for whatever reason, couldn't get it going. So 5,300, certainly not going to be, I don't think, overly popular. This is a guy that I think is going to have a huge year, and he's off to a terrible start through 1 week. But 5,300, I will go right back to Evan Ingram.
Cheap guys like Chris Herndon haul in 6 of 7 catches, efficient in terms of targets, but only 37 yards. He also lost a fumble. Just looking over some of these cheap guys, Jack Doyle, 3 for 49, only 4 targets. That was disappointing. I thought we'd get more from him, especially if you told me that Rivers threw for almost 400 yards. I would definitely think you'd be getting more out of him there, but it wasn't the case. Just to go over this list, Sal, someone like Rob Gronkowski, man, he was largely underutilized and really didn't put in, or had nothing to show for it. As a matter of fact, if you look at his snap counts for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this game, which spiraled out of control pretty quickly, Gronk did play 77%. Howard played 53%. They were on the field a lot together. Brate was on there for 10% as well. And then Noah Fant's got a very difficult matchup against Pittsburgh. If you just go up and down this list, there's a lot and the value. But let's sit in this, the guys I haven't touched on yet. Let's sit in this range from like 4,500 up to 56, where the threshold is Ertz, then to Andrews. Is there anybody we like in here?
Yeah, I like Hayden Hurst a lot. He was kind of the flop leg, or this week would be a flop leg play. A lot of people were on him. Didn't do much when everybody else in his offense was going off around him. But I think a lot of that can probably be credited. Like, he ran all the routes, 45 routes. He was the only tight end targeted more than once downfield on any offense last week from 20 plus yards. And I think a lot can be credited to matchups against Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams compared to the rest of Seattle's secondary, which is so outside of Griffin. And that's exactly what Atlanta did. They attacked everywhere else. So $4,600, the price really doesn't change that much. They put him in the slot 27 times, which is very good to see. It's almost elite numbers for a tight end in his first week. So yeah, I'm going to go right back to Hurst at $4,600, and then probably up all the way to Zach Ertz. I think a lot of people, Goddard showed out. I think a lot of people might take that as a way to get away from Ertz, but everything he did was fine. The way that they used him, he just didn't pick up any of the yardage or receptions after really like the first quarter. So 3 catches, 18 yards and a touchdown. He ended up having a drop in the game, but that didn't really influence much. He was still used as he normally is. I don't see any reason to why he had one bad half to just run away from him.
So Goddard and Ertz were on the field a lot. Like, the 12 personnel they ran was almost not every single play, but 85% of snaps for Ertz, 79% for Dallas Goedert, Ben. These guys shared the field a ton in this game. And Goddard, as a matter of fact, was targeted 9 times, had that score, had a pretty big game. Meanwhile, on the opposite him, you had Zach Ertz with 7 targets. So 16 total targets between your tight ends, playing almost all of the snaps. It's a very weird offense you've got going on right now in Philly.
It's definitely unique. And yeah, I mean, Ertz is someone who's live, no matter who's on the slate, to be the top tight end. We have seen it time and time again. Found the end zone, but just didn't do much. But the Eagles didn't do much as a whole. Similar to last week, I'll let kind of how I build dictate where I go. There are guys in the 3K range all the way up to the top guys that I feel pretty comfortable with. So I'm not going to force in a range, unlike some of these others, particularly running back, where I see a huge drop off. Like, I think you can punt tight end, no problem. I think you can pay up for the big names, no problem.
Sal, I'll throw one more at you. We'll go around the table and we'll close it out with one final pick here at tight end. Opinions will change throughout the week. More research, more injury news, more stuff will surface. But this is always a good start to kind of get us going and put us all in the right direction, because we're working through our own thoughts on this as well with so much fresh data coming off of week 1. Jonnu Smith was pretty effective, and that was against a really good Denver defense and Denver secondary. I think looking at his opportunities, knowing that Tannehill didn't have massive passing volume, and he generally isn't going to, but 43 is a lot for Tannehill. For Tannehill, I would usually never expect to see something that high. Jonnu Smith was targeted in the red zone. He's 4,200. He's got the Jacksonville Jaguars. If he goes completely underrun, that's somebody that I'll probably be willing to look towards. But I do want to temper expectations, because I don't anticipate another 40-plus pass attempts from Ryan Tannehill. Who do you have? Last one here, Sal.
Yeah, I'll just say I like Jonnu, 20% target share. It looked really good. I would say the one guy that is probably going to be a cash candidate as the week goes on, and just overall, Logan Thomas was used in like a ridiculous way for the Redskins. 26% target share.
Sound the alarm. He said Redskins.
Oh, man.
Oh, there it is. I thought it would be me.
I think I've said that thing like 30 times already. That's on me. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, we need to get a siren for
that would be a horn. Yeah.
Jordan, figure out a way to get a horn together, so whenever somebody says Redskins, we can shame them live.
Yeah, it's like a little rubber band test on your arm.
Yes, exactly.
We'll just block it from our memory completely.
Exactly. Little tasers hooked up.
Oh, it's going to be good.
I'm going to just call them the team. So the team, Logan Thomas, yeah, I mean, used insane. I mean, there was murmurs of this. He got the starting job on the depth chart. They said he had a really good camp. There's nobody else really on this team right now.
There you
That's
go.
Good. That's really good. But yeah, he played out of the slot, 18 snaps and 26% target share. 8 targets, was second only behind Goddard for all tight ends week 1. I don't want to take too much from it, but he's too cheap. Like, if that's going to be his role on this team in a fine matchup against Arizona, I don't want to say, like, Arizona was terrible against tight ends last year. They did a lot in the draft, a little bit of free agency to like change that. Like, they actually spent their first round pick on that exact reason, although they didn't play much last week. They kind of held Kittle down. So I'm going to go Logan Thomas, 3,600. There's other guys in that range, like Jack Doyle's same narrative for Hayden Hurst. He played a lot. He played in a lot of good spots like the slot. He just didn't come through. So I'll go back to those guys.
I think that's a great call on Logan Thomas. And one of the simpler reasons for this is, outside of Terry McLaurin, they don't have anybody. And I don't anticipate the run game being stout. Peyton Barber, no. Gibson, no. And Gibson wasn't even that efficient in the passing game. I expect him to advance a little bit going forward. But and an Arizona team that last year was dreadful against tight ends. I don't assume they'll be that much improved. So I'm with you on Logan Thomas. Ben, what do you got?
I'll make that unanimous. I'll say this though. If he, for some reason, starts to become massive chalk down there, I'll probably use him in cash and come in under in tournaments, just because it's not super reliable. Second, with Doyle as well, he had opportunities, just didn't come through. The last guy I'll mention, if you want to get a little unique exposure to Dallas and the Falcons game, Dalton Schultz should be in line for more work now that Jarwin is gone, unfortunately, with injuries. So 3,700 for a guy that we could see his role start to really increase. And if you don't want to do the traditional stack, throwing him in here could create leverage in probably the best game.
All right. A little fun here, fellas, with some defense, special team stacks. We did it last Tuesday. We'll do it every Tuesday. Just picking a cheap defense and seeing how it works out. I believe both of you guys were on Washington, which was good to see. Nice work there. I had a decent amount of them as well, but I don't think I mentioned them on the show. I'm going to go. Oh man, there's not a lot of cheap. Let's say, what do we have to stick under? Stick under, if we had to go under, maybe 2,500. We'll do that. Let's say
gives us about 10.
What's up?
That gives us like 10 defenses to choose from.
Okay, so yeah, let's do that. I want to say the Giants just because I do think that Mitchell Trubisky is still not very good. I'll go all the way to the bottom and I'll say the Dolphins. I don't think their defense was all that bad against Cam Newton. They actually limited their production through both phases of the game enough to keep it a lowish scoring affair. And as much as I love Josh Allen, Ben, he's still someone that's going to throw interceptions. They still have one of the best corners in the game. And well, I don't think they're good, but Josh Allen is the type of guy that could throw a pick 6 or 2 and things get ugly. And one more thing, Devin Singletary's fumbling problems are just one more reason to think that you could get some turnovers. Who do you got, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great, listen, Josh Allen, he's going to make at least a couple mistakes each game. And when you're this low, a couple turnovers, you're almost there. Like, that's all you need. I'll go a little more conservative. I do think that the Broncos showed something last night. I thought they were good. They can get pressure. I'm not sold certainly on Pittsburgh's running game at this point. If they put a lot of heat on Big Ben, I still think he's live to make some mistakes. So they're sitting at 2,500. I'll roll the dice with a little Broncos this week.
Ooh, all right. You call that conservative?
Well, I mean, it's better than saying like I'm picking the Jets. That's danger zone. For this, it's conservative.
I think that's a pretty interesting one for sure. Roethlisberger, he's going to make some mistakes, and I don't know, maybe he's not as sharp as he needs to be at coming off of missing almost a full calendar year. So I'm on board with that. 2,500. Okay, Sal, close us out, baby.
Yeah, Denver was going to be the choice. It's nowhere near last week down here, but I'll go one up a little bit more than danger zone. I'll go with the Chargers defense against the Kansas City Chiefs. So, high totals. I just want to attack the high totals. I'm not expecting Mahomes to make a lot of mistakes. He doesn't have to make mistakes for this price point at 2,000 to pay off. They are, after week 1, they were the top 5 in pressure rate as a unit on defense. They're stacked everywhere in terms of cornerbacks. I think they could make life difficult for Mahomes. I don't think it's going to be that difficult overall, but yeah, you don't need a pick 6 to get this thing to pay off. So I'll target the pressure rate like we did last week with Washington at the minimum price.
I love it. Great stuff as always, fellas. Guys, thanks for hanging out with us. We love doing this every day of the week, especially this morning on a wonderful Tuesday. Got a few days to go before Thursday night football. Josh Engelman will be putting out his showdown videos. They're really awesome. Be sure to check those out. And well, you know what? I'll leave it there. We got the NBA Live Before Lock show coming up, MLB Live Before Lock show coming up throughout the day, and the PGA Strategy show. Ben, you're on at 2:30. We got everything today. Hit that thumbs up on your way out the door. We appreciate you guys. And remember, last day to use the promo code REDZONE, half off your NFL Awesemo Plus weekly pass. Everything included, $7.50. Today's the last day to do it. Jump in now, and come say what's up in premium Slack chat after you do. Peace.